Well, let's bring in three members of Parliament to follow up on this debate now and latest developments and a number of developing stories in the country today. Let's go to the foyer of the House of Commons, where you'll see Peter Schiefke, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment. Stephanie Kusie is the critic for families, children and social development for the official opposition. And Rachel Blaney is the whip for the NDP. It's good to see you all. Thanks for taking time to speak with me. We've just heard from Jonathan Wilkinson, so Stephanie Kusie, let me start with you. Your leader and your party in question period today pretty much drew a straight line today between the Teck Resources decision to abandon its application for the Frontier mine and the government's handling of the blockades. How do you believe those two things are connected?
Well, I think we can even look previous to this, Peter, to the anti-energy ideology we've seen from this government. They have sent the message over and over again through Bill C-69, through Bill C-48, that Canada is not open for business. Teck Frontier was definitely seen as the final line in the sand regarding the support for the natural resources sector. And there is absolutely no doubt that the Prime Minister's inability to take a position of leadership last week was the final straw in the decision for the withdrawal of this project, because frankly, corporations and industry just can't count on Canada right now as a stable place to do business. The
Teck Resources CEO, Don Lindsay, in his letter to the Environment Minister, writes this: investors and customers increasingly want jurisdictions to have a framework in place that reconciles resource development and climate change. This does not yet exist here today. And unfortunately, the growing debate around this issue has placed Frontier and our company squarely at the nexus of much broader issues that need to be resolved. That seems to suggest that all political leaders need to get their act together because the conflict is driving away certainty and investment.
Well, I certainly think that the events of last week did nothing to instill confidence in investors outside of Canada. But as for the environment, we as the official opposition have been stating throughout the entire processes of both C-69, C-48, and now the approval of Teck, which of course did go through a rigorous environmental evaluation and did receive approval, as well as from the First Nations involved. It received approval on all of these fronts. Canada is known as a place where we have the most ethical energy produced within the world. And if the government wants to say that it's a result of not having a solid environmental plan, it's been 5 years now almost, Peter, that they have been in charge. They should have put this environmental plan into place.
Rachel Blaney, how do you think, or do you think, all of these things are connected? The blockades, the failing energy projects, intergovernmental battles over climate change policies. What are your thoughts?
Well, it definitely is a failure of leadership. If we look at what happened over the last week, what we saw at the beginning of the week was the Prime Minister finally admitting that there was a role for the federal government, which was very clear for a very long time. And then throughout the middle of the week, stating very clearly that they were there to listen. And then by the end of the week saying, okay, we've done listening and we're going to just put the onus, and that's a direct quote, onus on Indigenous leadership. So when you see that lack of leadership, it does create a framework of uncertainty for everyone involved. We also have a government that keeps saying that the economy and the environment go hand in hand, and yet they're not providing leadership on either factor. So this is the challenge. As we see an economy that's changing because there is an environmental crisis that we need to start addressing in a more comprehensive and meaningful way, I think we're going to see projects just like this one say, look, until you have a framework that's going to make sense, that's going to give leadership in Canada and across the world, we're not ready to do business. And so it's unfortunate to see that happening, but that's what the Prime Minister has led us to.
Mr. Schiefke, we have the blockades, we have reconciliation on the rocks according to some Indigenous leaders, the Teck Resources decision, the carbon tax ruling in Alberta today, more questions about Western alienation popping up. What is happening, I guess, to the grand bargain that was supposed to have your government bring all these things together in harmony? What do you make of what we've seen the last couple of weeks here?
Well, I think we've been steadfast since the beginning about our plan to grow the economy and protect the environment. We've been very clear that we want to not only meet our Paris targets, but exceed them. Most recently, we announced that we want to ensure that Canada is carbon neutral by 2050. And we didn't just use words, we backed them up with record investments, a price on carbon pollution all across the country, record investments in public transportation, a whole slew of other actions, over 50 to be sure. And what you mentioned about what was mentioned in the letter by Don Lindsay, the CEO of Teck, was that we need greater certainty from other levels of government, particularly the government of Alberta. Now, Premier Jason Kenney came into power. He said he wanted to ensure that they kept the 100 megaton cap in place, yet since taking office, he's done absolutely nothing to show how they're going to go about doing that and reconcile resource exploitation and advancing projects like Teck while also ensuring that they keep within that cap. And that's what Teck was looking for. And so we invite Mr. Kenney to the table. We want to work with the provinces. We know that's the only way we're going to be able to achieve our goals of meeting and exceeding the Paris targets. The invitation is open. We want to make sure we work with them because we know that's the only way we're going to be able to do it.
All right. Stephanie Kusie, let's talk about the blockades for a moment here and the action taken by, after a couple of weeks, the government tried the route of 2+ weeks, tried the route of peaceful negotiation, and now we have the police involved and we see more blockades popping up. Where do you think we're headed here?
Well, I think that we are headed towards more poor leadership. We said as the official opposition, we were on day 15 as of Friday with inaction until the Prime Minister made that announcement. But it was his lack of leadership, his inaction that allowed us to get to that point. We continue to believe in the official opposition that we need to respect the rule of law, that all Canadians need to respect the rule of law. And this falls squarely in the lap of the Prime Minister to ensure that this rule of law is respected.
But how concerned are you that we saw people lying in the streets and blocking traffic in the capital today? Another blockade popped up in outside of Montreal today. There's a second demonstration where they're burning tires near Tyendinaga again today. So one wonders, if you try to shut one down, are we just going to see more blockades in support? Well,
this is exactly what we've been saying during question period in the House of Commons. I think it was best stated by my colleague Pierre Poilievre, and that is that this lack of action from the Prime Minister is actually emboldening radical activists and encouraging further acts of anarchy and chaos, which will further disrupt our society economically and beyond. So we expect more action than this, greater action than this. But based upon what we've seen so far, I don't think we're going to get it.
Rachel Blaney, where do you think we're headed here? We've seen more protests pop up. What's your view of how the government is handling this to this point?
Well, again, it is a total failure of leadership on the part of the Prime Minister. As I said earlier, the Wet'suwet'en people, the hereditary chiefs there, were asking to meet with the Prime Minister, and he kept saying, "It's not my problem, it's not my problem." When we have issues like that, we need to see action that actually de-escalates. And what has happened is the exact opposite. We've been asking the Prime Minister to meet with the Wet'suwet'en chiefs and to appoint a mediator. Where is that mediator? Right now, things are getting out of control because the Prime Minister is choosing not to take responsibility. And when he doesn't take responsibility, people are feeling unheard and frustration grows across this country. Obviously, Indigenous rights and title, it needs to be addressed. There's some really complex issues, but I can tell you that dialogue is always the way to solution, and what the Prime Minister has chosen to do and what he avoided doing to the point where we are today is really unfortunate. I hope to see a mediator appointed very quickly.
Mr. Schiefke, what can you tell us about I guess the way forward is, one way this is going to move, I suppose, is if there are these negotiations, conversations, discussions between your government and the hereditary chiefs. What can you tell us? We don't seem to be hearing anything about when that might happen. The two sides seem far apart still.
Well, you're absolutely right, Peter. The way forward is to have discussions with the hereditary chiefs. It's something actually the Prime Minister showed leadership on by saying from the get-go that we wanted to engage in dialogue and not to forcibly remove them from those blockades. After 10 days, the Prime Minister made a choice and made a statement that due to the shortages of some key products, such as propane for our farmers, such as some water treatment chemicals that weren't making their way to municipalities, that he called to an end for the blockade. But the one thing that we've always said from the get-go is that our goal is to advance reconciliation, make sure that we are continuing to open dialogue with the hereditary chiefs. That hand is still out, waiting for that to be accepted and to continue that dialogue.
Well, that's part of the issue, right? You keep waiting. I mean, there are overtures that take place, but so far, do you know if there's any meetings set?
And it's important to continue doing that and to continue saying.
But do you know if there are any
ready.
meetings set? Do you know if there's been any agreement to actually?
I'm not privy to that information right now. The one thing I can say is we have two very capable ministers, Minister Miller and Minister Bennett, who have engaged and are looking to continue engaging in dialogue. It's a priority for us, but at the same time, we also know that we need to react to protect our economy and make sure that Canadians are safe and they have access to the products they need to keep them safe.
Okay.
And so we're moving forward with that as well.
All right. I want to thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. We'll talk again. Take care.
Thank you, Peter.